Turn it up.
Meow. Oopus Cat. Long Voyage Back by Rheinhart was written in 1983, and I'm slowly reading it every Friday for you guys. I know it's not hugely popular, but I think it's an important book to actually read. Cold War fiction, bugging out by boat. It's got a different take on it. It's pretty good literature. And I'm going to talk about the third part of it that I've read so far, and that would be pages 171 through to pages 121. And just out of interest, he got snow up to here. Got a foot of snow. So the vagabond, which is very much a character in this book, is actually not very much featured in this section. It's almost entirely set in Morehead City, North Carolina, which has become a regional centre of power for the United States Army and Coast Guard, and sort of the Navy. Though as we find out, the Navy's in a very bad shape. One of the things straight off the bat that you find out about the transfer from the ocean voyage to Morehead City is there's more people, and the people are in a bad state, and a lot of people are spending a lot of energy where they have energy left into trying to get out. In fact, a large amount of gold is offered for a place aboard the Vagabond. People know they're kind of trapped in Morehead City, but they don't have an option. One thing that's not really mentioned in this book, certainly not in this section either, is the role that prostitution and rape would take in a society that's fallen this badly this quickly. I think it's overlooked. I think there would be a lot of forced sex or sex for exchange going on. Certainly with the soldiers who've been drafted, they've got a slightly better standard of living. With things this desperate, even after 10 days, I can easily see women and young girls selling themselves for a quickie with these soldiers in exchange for maybe a potato from their dining room. Seriously, things are going to be pretty bad pretty fast. I don't think we kind of grasp or can grasp intellectually how fast society would fall in an all-out nuclear war. An example of this is when they take Seth to the hospital, and the hospital is basically a garage and a mat on the floor. They're triaged, if they're triaged at all, and they're just left to die. They either recover or they die. There's very little actually healthcare or nursing going on. What is going on is being done by volunteers who frankly won't be volunteering for very long when they run out of food. So the idea that the healthcare system is going to sort of try and function isn't really going to work too well. I did like the fact that the nurses, the doctors and the paramedics had largely been drafted into the actual army and had been removed from the civilian healthcare system. I thought that was reasonable. I thought the fact they would see a doctor for 1 hour a week in the refugee centre, also I found that quite believable. That said, transportation of ill people to hospital centres, that's not going to happen. You're going to have to put people in wheelbarrows or carry them there to get them there quite soon after a full-scale nuclear war or any massive SHTF. So a lot of the injured will never even get to the hospital, and very quickly people are going to appreciate the hospitals are places where people go to die horribly. I do think that's going to be the case. So we get a non-hyperbole look at both the initial phase of being drafted and also the refugee centre, and also a bit about the hospital and the effects on the Navy. And I think this is really one of the strengths of the Long Voyage Back by Rheinhart, is the fact that he doesn't seek to make a 1 second after out of every single scene where the hero overcomes and is incredibly charismatic. It's pretty much normal people trying to survive and dealing with a totally different state of fare. There's a description of the mass graves, but again, how long is gasoline going to be wasted into making mass graves? If you're by the sea, they're probably just going to throw them into the ocean, knowing the tides will carry them away from their particular part of the beach. Things are going to get pretty gross pretty quick. The other one I think was interesting is the fact that the refugee centre that's been set up is absolutely packed, and I think that would be very, very realistic. There would be small amounts of violence, and some small tribes would set up inside these refugee centres to grab the extra spaces there. But I think overall the crime would be fairly low. If you stay in the refugee centre, as is pointed out by Katya in the book, the character, it's because you're not really alive anymore. She says the alive people leave after 1 to 2 days. And the reason she hasn't left is because she doesn't buy that there's anywhere else safe to go, but she's still actively looking. And that works out for her. They get fed fish, onions and water, and I think that's going to be fairly realistic. But my other question here is by day 10, with very little power, or if any power at all, if you're able to catch ocean fish, you're one step ahead of a lot of people in a nuclear disaster. How are you catching this fish? They managed to steal a little bit of gasoline. The Coast Guards just seem to be driving up and down like they don't care about oil supply. But I think 10 days into this, there'll be a lot less travelling up and down in boats, even by the US Coast Guard and Navy. Now in 1983, one of the most shocking parts of the book, I think for a lot of people, is the fact that Neil is a deserter. He resigned from the American Navy because he did not like their policy of just destroying fishing boats in Vietnam without any engagement. He felt it was wrong, so he had stepped out of the Navy, despite being a good officer. And he, when he engages his naval self by going to actually enlist, which he does not do, he actually loots from the United States Navy. Now the boat's dying, literally. The people on it are dying. They've all got radiation poisoning. The boat's never going to go to sea again. And these people have got days to weeks. So he sensibly, carefully and safely loots penicillin, tetracycline specifically, and a handgun and a few other bits and pieces. And I think that's a really key and important message. When all has failed, when all has gone down, don't waste time looking for stuff. Don't waste time risking yourself by looting. But when you see stuff and it's safe to take it, grab it. That's smart. And one of the other shocking scenes in 1983 would be the Battle of the Farm. The government knows the radiation's coming to Moorhead City, and every animal and every person in Moorhead City has got maybe a week max, and they're dead. The government knows this. It has not told anybody because it wants its locus of control where it evacuates their people, their essential stuff out. So they decide that all the animals are going to die, we're taking them all. The farmers rightly kick up a huge fuss because they don't know why. And when they're told why, they don't believe it. And if you look back at any famines in the past, it's absolutely essential that farmers are given livestock and actually are able to eat. Because if they can't produce food, long term you're in trouble. The United States Army here is literally has given up on Moorhead City and is just going to take everything it wants and move away from Moorhead City to regroup. Now how often they're going to do this is another interesting matter, and I think that takes up the whole point. In a sudden dislocation of normality, a sudden nuclear war, a sudden meteor strike, volcanic eruption, whatever it is, we're prepped. But I still think the dislocation and the sense of mental anguish and uncertainty would be very, very high. Having just about died, having just about managed to bug out, having just about escaped, when you find a centre of safety, which Moorhead City appears to be, though in fact it is a death trap, because the radiation clouds are coming in and they can't feed the population they have anyway, to bug out again with less is going to be really tough mentally. And I think that's something we need to take on board. The concept of the bug out from the bug out from the bug out, constantly getting up and running away, constantly having to assess how safe you actually are, I think is really critical. And Neil does this very well. He actually continues to monitor radio. He keeps looking at shortwave frequencies. He's listening to the ham radios. He's independently trying to verify just what the danger is to him from radiation in Moorhead City. And I think that's important. And I think that's something we should not overlook, is the fact that in prepping we focus on getting to the bug out. Okay, we can argue about whether we should bug out or not, but getting to the bug out. If the bug out's compromised, living out of your backpack, sounds kind of difficult. But what happens if you don't have a bug out location left because it's been nuked, or there's lava over it, or ash? What happens if you have to go to a place of safety and actually go into a refugee camp? At what point are you going to evacuate yourself again from what appears to be uncomfortable, not great, but some amount of safety? Because if you don't, as we know, evacuate early from these types of situations, you're going to die. If they hadn't evacuated themselves from Moorhead City quickly, they would have been trapped there and they would have died. I do think the chain of command in Moorhead City is done pretty realistically. I do think a lot of the officers and a lot of the NCOs, a lot of the troops are actually just going to be grateful that they have something to do and some measure of stability and safety in the midst of this chaos. And there won't be much divergence from official communiques and rules. Obviously, if things are pretty bad, they're just going to shoot you if you do that anyway. So don't expect a listening, caring military or police response in SHTF. Now, it kind of goes without saying, but I've seen this over and over again at the hospital where people have done things that aren't acceptable, and we've told them that these are not acceptable and they need to stop. And when they continue to do those behaviours, we tell them again that this is a private hospital, and because healthcare in Canada is private public and the hospitals are actually non-profit but private, that if they continue with the behaviour, we will charge them with trespass and if necessary have them arrested and jailed. And they don't believe us, and they'll scream and shout and carry on acting like crazy people, and then we get them cuffed and taken away because they can't accept the fact that what they want isn't going to be allowed. And I do think in a condition of massive SHTF that's going to be a real problem. The army and the police are going to have very short tempers. I really do think so. Like, you know, when somebody's doing something wrong, I think they're just going to shoot to kill. Not straight away, but I think within a couple of days. That also brings into the point of who's going to still be serving. Well, in a condition like the book portrays, I think quite a lot of the army and the police will still be serving. I really do. Because they don't really have an alternative, and at least they're getting some food rations and some measure of this is what we should do today. Whereas the vast majority of the population have no idea what to do today because their entire world stopped and nothing's replaced it. So Macklin comes back and tells them they can't get out of Red City. There are roadblocks. They're being abandoned because the army units there are watching everybody go south but nobody going north, and they're kind of going, huh? And also probably picking up rumours of the radioactive cloud that's heading towards Moorhead City, which the population in the refugee centre have no clue about. So they decide to flee on the Vagabond. I'm not altogether convinced it was a very smart plan. I think there's other ways of doing that, but that's just me. But they do get out, they do get back out to sea, and they get a measure of stability again. It's a happy place that they arrive in. So Jane's critical in that. She brings an element of spirituality back to the dining room experience at dinner time, where she enforces a 30-second silence to remember the world that's gone and the people that have gone, and encourages people to say and thank other people. That's critical. Thank people. There is a little discussion of rationing, and they do keep the cigarettes that have been taken to barter. And there is a discussion of bartering, but this section of the book finishes up with the anti-American and anti-Russian white feeling in the Bahamas. I do think people around the world will be very anti-American if America involves itself in a nuclear war. And that would extend to Canadians, and that would extend to British and French and Germans. I don't think the rest of the world, if you actually are able to flee to Egypt or Libya or Nigeria, are going to welcome you. And other than food riots and all the rest of it, I think they're just going to kill you. I think their own police forces by day 10, by day 14 in the scenario painted in this book, you can fly in or boat in. They're just going to kill you and take your stuff. You're not them. You killed their world. You've killed people they know by your insane war. They are going to hate you. Anyway, so that's it from me. I do think that the ocean fishing is portrayed as easy to some degree, and I don't think it is. And I think to actually feed that number of adults, mostly through calories by fishing, whilst moving on an ocean-going catamaran, is going to be very difficult. I think, again, I will keep saying this, I think food and food procurement is going to be the number one thing you're going to have to do, other than get killed. Anyway, that's all from me. Remember, in SHTF, tomorrow is always going to be worse than today, unless you prep. And you can prep by reading this book. It's a goodie. Toodles!